Welcome to Colorado Conversations. I'm Genelle Padilla. Today we're talking about something that can be very painful to discuss: abuse, specifically domestic and sexual abuse. Well, today I'm joined by a survivor of abuse, now author June Berlinger, who now helps guide others through what can be a long and complex healing journey. We want to welcome you, June, because you're not only an advocate for survivors, but your background is in healthcare as well,
Yes.
which I think really couples well with what you were trying to do and trying to help others that find themselves in these situations. So welcome. Thank you for being willing to talk to us about this.
I'm thrilled to be here.
So first of all, tell us about your background. You're a nurse?
I'm a registered nurse and a mother, and had 2 boys. And unfortunately, one died of suicide 18 years ago. So I have 3 granddaughters, and I'm thrilled with that, and happily remarried.
Well, first of all, I'm very sorry about your son, and I do want to talk about that as well, because I think that has contributed to your fuel behind your message.
Yes.
The reason we got in contact with you is because you are an advocate for abuse, because you were a victim as well. And I know this is hard to talk about, but can you give us some background on your experience?
I sure can. I am a survivor of childhood trauma in the form of witnessing my dad severely abuse my mom. And then I'm the second oldest, so my older sister and I experienced emotional abuse and fear from my dad, but he also physically accosted my siblings. Then from age 5 to 11, I was sexually abused from my paternal grandfather, and date raped at 15, and then in a 13-year abusive marriage.
That's a lot.
It was a
trauma.
lot, yes.
I mean, how do you process that? As a child starting so young, and it seemed like it was consistent throughout your life.
It was, and I've learned a lot about trauma in writing the book, and trauma has a unique feature in that you can hide the trauma. It happens subconsciously because, like, for example, with the incest, I had no recollection of being molested until I was 31.
Oh, wow.
And had an experience where all of a sudden the memory came back. But as I was writing the book, I was able to connect the dots of how I ended up in a domestic violence marriage. And it was easy to follow and see once it was all laid out right in front of me.
So what prompted you to kind of take a step back from, I would think you're enveloped into this trauma and not even quite understanding? What was the bridge that got you to becoming an advocate and writing this book and putting all of your experience down?
Number 1 is resilience. I grew up with a very resilient mother, and so with resilience, I just kept pushing through. It was what I did, and for my boys, I had to. And so resilience is the number 1 factor with that. But also, it was recognizing that there was a better way and a better life. And coming to that happened over time, but I first had to learn and understand. I can remember thinking, how did I get into such an abusive marriage and relationship? Because I'm a nice, kind person, a nurse who cares about others. And what I learned is that victims who grow up in abusive homes are more likely to get into an abusive relationship. And when they do, they stay longer than a victim who's not been in a home growing up with abuse.
Do you think that's because it's a familiar feeling?
Yes, yes. Not comfortable, but familiar, absolutely. So by the time I was date raped, it was not all that traumatic. I was able to recover from that, never told a soul, never told a soul. And it was, well, that was another bad thing that happened, and then just kind of moved on. But I was not a typical victim. I was not promiscuous. I didn't get in trouble. I didn't refer to drugs and alcohol. Instead, I believed if I was good enough, smart enough, studied enough, that it would all stop because I felt I could control it.
Were you able to talk to anyone? I mean, this started, you said, around 3 years old.
Yes.
Were you able to talk to your mother or like teachers or anyone else, an adult, to help you?
Never. Nothing traumatic and abusive and related to alcohol in the family was ever talked about. Everything was a secret. And I also knew I wouldn't be believed. So my mother was just trying to survive herself in the situation. And so I knew I had to fight my own battles.
It's so difficult because when you're talking about it, it's so complex, and a lot of times you don't have these signs in the household. You know, that someone from the outside can say, "Hey, this young child needs help."
Right.
I don't even know where to begin. Where do you begin in your book to start helping people? What's a good starting point for people who may be going through this?
Number one is to understand the trauma, to understand the types of abuse, because the reason I wrote the book is to share my personal experience, which means being open and vulnerable.
Right.
And then others can read it, identify with pieces, and from that they go, okay, she seems okay. She seems healthy, happy, and content, which I am now. And so it is, how did she get there?
Right. So you mentioned identifying different types of abuse.
Yes.
And I know I spouted off sexual abuse and domestic abuse. Can you kind of break down for us what these types of abuse is or are?
Yes. First of all, sexual abuse is pornography. It is, I'm going to talk about incest as well as sexual abuse with domestic violence. But usually there is pornography involved on the side of the perpetrator. It is putting the victim down sexually, having the victim do what she doesn't want to do, what she's uncomfortable with. And so it is pushing her to do very uncomfortable sexual acts.
I think a lot of people who may be uncomfortable may dismiss it in a household because maybe they're just uncomfortable. They don't acknowledge or realize it's even a type of abuse.
That's correct.
And it kind of can just go on because they're so subtle, and what you're talking about are more subtle signs of abuse.
The abuse becomes, for me, it was a familiar way of living. And so it's easy for me to see how I was attracted to someone that would abuse me, as crazy as that sounds.
Right. It just makes me sad because I mean, especially when you think about younger people going through this and feeling so helpless. What, in hindsight, I know it's always 2020, what should you have done as a younger person in a household like that? Or was there anything that you could have done?
I think I did everything I could. In today's society, tell someone you trust and feel safe with, whatever type of abuse it is, because that's the beginning of healing, by reaching out and not keeping it a secret any longer.
I know it may sound obvious, but what do you think holds people back from saying anything to an adult or someone outside of their home?
Fear. Fear is number one.
Okay.
The abuser has threatened the victim. If you tell anybody, this, or this will happen to you. And as a result, the abuser also believes that it is behind closed doors, it's a personal, private matter, it's no one else's business. And if the victim talks to anybody, and the abuser finds out, he assumes that she has told them about the abuse, whether she has or not. And so fear of what the abuser will do holds the victim back. For me, it was fear of killing me. He told me he was going to kill me, and he tried. Also, he threatened to take my children, and I would never see him again. And my biggest purpose in life was raising my children. So that was very difficult for me.
That is a huge consequence. I mean,
yes.
it's the biggest consequence.
Right.
But there are consequences also for keeping it inside and not speaking out about it. And I want to get to those. There's so much to talk about with you. I mean, you've lived through this, but we do have to take a quick break.
Okay.
So we'll be right back with more with June Berlinger on her advocacy for sexual abuse and domestic abuse victims. Welcome back to Colorado Conversations. I'm here with June Berlinger. You have a background in healthcare, but the reason why we wanted you to sit with us today is because you're an advocate for abuse victims. You wrote a book, it's called Rising Above the Trauma of Abusive Families Journey, and this is very personal to you.
Yes.
And so I want to get right into it of why that you wrote this book. I know that you have lived through a lot of abuse since the very young age, but you have a specific reason as well.
I have healed. I am a thriving survivor. I am no longer a victim. And so I have been doing volunteer opportunities to do presentations, to meet with victims one-on-one to help them. I was simply doing my morning prayers and meditation, and I received a distinct message that said, "You are going to write a book." I went, "Oh no, I am not writing a book." It was nowhere on my radar. A second message came through that said, "You're writing a book. You have a message to share. Others need to hear it. I will help you." Honestly, that is what happened, because I had no idea of writing a book anywhere.
Is there some kind of responsibility that you feel to share your experience?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when I was a nurse in the medical center, I was a director of a women's center and did women's outpatient services. I became the domestic violence go-to person in the medical center. Did training for all the staff, for doctors, nurses, and others, and then was called to when there would be a possible victim on how to handle them so I could train the staff. So that is where my help started in that capacity.
Do you work with survivors of abuse?
One-on-one, word of mouth. I am not currently volunteering at a domestic violence center, and doing training is where my focus really is.
And we talked about this during the break, that there are hidden costs, hidden emotional wounds that people can carry with them if they don't get help, if they don't find someone like you to help pull them out of this dark place that they've probably many people bury deep down. Can you talk about those wounds that people can carry with them into adulthood?
Absolutely. First of all, the victim needs to understand and try to get help with what is going on, because abuse is very insidious. It happens very slowly. There is a cycle to it that keeps the victim stuck in the abusive relationship. And so what happens, I don't believe most victims heal. I think that fear is one of the reasons that keeps them stuck. But what happens is ongoing depression with victims. That's one of the causes. The other is repeating, and unless they get help and heal, going into another abusive relationship, which is very normal and common.
And that's what happened with you as well. And you said it because I think what you said, it feels familiar.
Yes, very much so. The important thing is, once a victim is able to identify what is going on and reaches out to help to someone safe, and a domestic violence center is the first place to go because it's confidential, then they can start the process. It took me 3 years to leave the marriage before I left, because my ex was so dangerous and had threatened to kill me and tried to kill me on one occasion. And because of that, I had to do a lot of preventive work, training, getting my resources in place, because I chose to stay in the family home.
What was the last straw? Do you remember?
Good question. There were two. One is, I had reached the point that I felt I was going crazy. So I felt it would be easier to live in a psychiatric center for the rest of my life or kill myself. I never thought of killing him. The other was I was beginning to see changes in the boys, my sons, Thomas and Michael, and they were starting to act out. I could tell that they were filled with fear, and I needed to act on their behalf.
I mean, those are not great choices, obviously, probably the worst choices, but it's interesting that you would harm yourself first before you would think about harming someone else.
A victim is beaten down before they're beaten up. And so my self-esteem was so bad when it came to this relationship. However, the opposite side of that is I was very successful professionally. And so that kept me going because I received good feedback, attaboys, and so I could deal with the trauma and the depression of living at home.
It just feels like so much weight on you, and we need to take another break, but probably the biggest weight of all was losing your son and the weight of that, and that's so heavy, and I want to hear how that has lent itself to turning around and helping others. So we'll be back with more with June Berlinger in just a moment. Welcome back to Colorado Conversations. We're sitting down with an advocate for survivors of abuse,
yes,
specifically domestic and sexual abuse, and talking about your motivations for writing this book to help others. And you mentioned that you lost a son to suicide.
Yes, my oldest son died of suicide at the age of 32, and this was 18 years ago. Unfortunately, he was alcoholic and was bipolar, like his father. And the depression just became too much for him. So he died of his illnesses, and it had been going on for a long time. His first suicide attempt was at age 10. He was the youngest patient they ever had in the youth psychiatric center, and it was by hanging, and I found him. And so that was the first. He had 3 more attempts during his childhood, years up to 18, but then fought with depression horribly with the bipolar.
Do you think some of his hardships also was from witnessing and experiencing abuse in his home?
Yes, absolutely. What he learned was you deal with anger by being violent. And once I was able to have Bob physically removed from the house, the boys had contact with him, where I wasn't there to be with him on visitation. And what I only learned when I was writing the book for my other son is that he was physically and emotionally abusing them terribly on those visits.
And so your book is about healing. And
Totally.
And I think a lot of people can relate to your story, even though if they don't want to admit it, maybe they're scared to admit it. Maybe they're even scared to have this book in their home. What are some of the main messages you want to send out to people who, are just kind of like on the brink of acknowledging, like, maybe I am being abused. Maybe this is not normal at home.
Number one, they're very courageous. To be able to survive in the relationship to this point takes immense courage. They have more coping strategies than they even know that they are utilizing daily. Secondly, is there's help. They're not alone. And faith and forgiveness were part of my healing journey. And so when someone reaches out for help, they will be given steps, resources that are out there to help them legally, mentally, physically, to help them survive.
What is it? I'm just looking at you talk about this, and you're just you have a light about you, and just learning about what you've gone through. People go through a very tiny fraction of what you go through, and they can't get out of a depression or anxiety. What is your secret to doing that?
Perseverance. My faith in God was a huge point. Believing the cup is half full. And the other is I realized in my 30s that I have a life purpose. And my life purpose is to take the adversity that I've experienced to help others. So I knew that and have formulated my entire career and retirement on reaching out and helping others with the messages that I can share.
I can't even imagine. I mean, just you sitting down and talking to someone who is going through this is probably life-changing, but now you have it in a book, a resource. And so let's talk about this book. So your book is out now on Amazon.
Yes.
Tell us how we can get it, how long it's been out, and anything else that we should know, people who wanted to read more about it.
It's been out 5 months. It took me 17 months to write it, nonstop.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's huge. And it's available on Amazon, Rising Above the Trauma of Abuse. And it's coming out in audiobook soon. So that is how someone can get a hold of it. Also, I have a website that's called risingabovetrauma.net. The important thing about the website and the book is both of them have extensive resources. Resources to help victims, resources to help family members, anyone who loves or cares for a victim, on helping them through the process.
That's incredible. And so, I mean, 17 months it took you to write it, and it's been out for 5 months. Is there another? Is there a part 2? Are you going to continue this journey with your advocacy?
Well, I am happily married. I'm sure my husband would not be able to handle me writing another book.
Yeah, you're probably like locked in a room somewhere, just going through processing your life, and not not some of the brightest points. But congratulations on that. I mean,
thank you.
Have you gotten good feedback, or have you gotten
The feedback has been more than I ever could have hoped for. People that have said, oh my gosh, I've never told anyone I was abused as a child. Or a friend that I've known for years that said, I have to tell you, I cried reading the book because I could identify with the sexual assault. So there were pieces of it that people were able to relate to and open up for the first time.
Unfortunately, you've gone through such a wide range of abuse, but that just speaks to how much you can process, and then maybe people will find pieces from your experience to help improve them. That's got to feel pretty good.
It does. And also, I speak to women's groups and community groups to share the message one-on-one.
Okay, Jen, one more time, what's the website where people can find you?
risingabovetrauma.net.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I know it's not easy, but I think knowing that you're helping others maybe just encourages this journey for you. This is the next chapter.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you for joining us for this episode of Colorado Conversations. I'm Genelle Padilla. We'll see you next time.